So in the aftermath of that failed acquisition, what now for Figma? What now for Adobe? Taking Figma first, history says companies left behind at the altar in acquisition tie-ups often don't fare very well. You do have the example of Plaid, which Visa tried to take out early on in its life, so people felt like Plaid dodged a bullet because they would be valued more than that acquisition price now, though that was in frothier times. More on that in a second. The acquiree in a failed merger often suffers because a lot of times the acquirer wanted to tie the knot for strategic reasons. They were willing to pay up for things other than just dollars and cents. But if you need to show pure profitability or growth after a lack of merger, it can be harder to do that on your own. The information suggests that Figma might be okay. For one thing, they now have $1 billion to play with in the form of the breakup fee Adobe has to pay them, but also because they expect to finish 2023 with more than $600 million in annual recurring revenue, which is up more than 40% year on year. Quote, the San Francisco-based company has also been generating cash for a few years, the people said. That financial picture makes it one of the best-performing late-stage private tech companies, particularly in a year when many firms have struggled with sagging growth rates as corporate clients have cut their software spending. Still, Figma isn't worth nearly what it was when it agreed to sell to Adobe in September 2022. Figma could be valued as low as about $9 billion, below the valuation of its last private round of financing, if investors assess it at the same multiple of its annual recurring revenue as that for Canva, a larger, more consumer-focused, privately held design software company. Investors last valued Canva, which had nearly $2 billion in ARR recently, at about $25 billion in a large secondary sale this year. Figma, however, focuses more on the corporate market, which means investors may value it more highly than Canva, which is focused more on the consumer market, end quote. Yeah, that's what I was just saying about being valued on a dollars and cents basis as opposed to, people being willing to pay up because they don't want you independent anymore. It was worth way more strategically for Adobe to have Figma than just the revenue Figma was generating. Figma also has another problem, employee morale. A bunch of employees were about to get rich because of this deal, but now that liquidity door has shut. So Figma is likely in the process of lining up investors to buy shares from employees in a secondary offering in order to keep employee morale up. Problem there is the investors would likely want to buy in at a price that, again, would be way below the $20 billion valuation Adobe had agreed to. Now, whither Adobe? Adobe does have $6 billion in cash on hand. They can use that to buy back shares. They can use that to invest more heavily into AI. But for Adobe, the real issue is they still haven't solved the problem that caused them to go after Figma in the first place. Startups and disruptors are eating Adobe's lunch. Without the ability to acquire those disruptors, where does Adobe turn to get growth? Quoting Bloomberg. When the company struck the $20 billion deal for Figma last September, investors worried that Adobe's core portfolio of creative software, including Photoshop and Illustrator, were running out of room to grow. Web-based startups such as Figma and Australia-based startup Canva were capturing the attention of younger users and rapidly gaining customers. The deal's high price only further convinced Adobe shareholders that management was anxious about the competition. Much of that gloom has dissipated in 2023 as Adobe invested rapidly into generative AI, building proprietary models and launching popular features. The stock has gained 77% this year as investors expect AI to expand Adobe's user base, increase revenue per user, and cement its dominance among creative design professionals, at least for now. The long-term threat of Canva, Figma, and new generative AI-based creative tools remains a concern for Adobe, Tyler Radke, an analyst at Citigroup, wrote Monday after the companies announced they were terminating the proposed deal. Still, the excitement about AI doesn't represent the same kind of immediate revenue generator for Adobe as Figma's product design app, wrote JP Morgan's Mark R. Murphy, end quote.